Listen Up with Jim Potts. Listen up, business owners, CFOs, human resource managers, and all managers and supervisors. Jim Potts is answering and addressing your questions and concerns, helping you stay out of court. Furthermore, please be advised that Jim's answers are not legal advice and are only intended as a guide based on his years of experience. The phone lines are open. 1-855-4-J-POTS. That's 1-855-457-6887. You can also email us at listenup@jameswilliampottsllc.com. Ready to listen up? Here is Jim Potts.
Jim Potts back on the air here. Well, I want to start off with somewhat of a somber note, as they say. I don't think anybody in this world has not heard about what happened down in Orlando. And it brings up a lot of different issues. My perspective of the issue is, quite frankly, obviously it's a sad situation. And we can look at it from the standpoint whether it's a terrorist activity or, domestic issue, whatever the case may be. My approach today is basically going to be talking about whether or not businesses are prepared for an active shooter at the workplace. Now, Orlando, San Bernardino, those are places that, whether you look at the victims or not, San Bernardino is clearly the victims where it was the workplace. When you look at Orlando, most people don't think about the workplace. They just think about something that happened at a club in Orlando. But remember, that club had employees. So for those employees, the issue would be terrorism and as applied to the work environment. So the approach today is, I think employers have to start understanding that they've now got to be prepared for the possibilities of an active shooter in the workplace. It's the times we're living in. And you're going to have to be prepared. And I think that there's going to be a wave of litigation in this area in the years to come, only because of the fact that what are employers doing to ensure the safety of their work environments? So I think that's a big deal. As a matter of fact, Cal OSHA is one example, is looking at whether or not they're going to have employers that have this workplace safety plan. And yes, I am actually working on this. I have site assessments that I'll be doing. Some clients have already lined up for that. And we'll be preparing training for the employees, etc. And this is all based upon my past experience and some things I learned when I was when I was involved in law enforcement. So, having started off that way, let's take a look at, first of all, what is an active shooter? There is a definition, believe it or not, for what defines an active shooter. An active shooter is an individual engaged in the killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms or just one single gun. The whole issue with automatic weapons. And there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. They just go in and shoot randomly. Now, this is when we're talking about an active shooter. Now, recently in California at UCLA, they had an active shooter shutdown. So what did UCLA? UCLA had prepared staff and apparently students, I believe, as well, what to do when the alarm goes out that there's an active shooter on campus. They reacted very quickly. Now, an active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve very quickly. Oftentimes, people panic. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to the victims. The problem is, because active shooter situations are often within 10 to 15 minutes before law enforcement can even get there. So those situations normally happen very quickly. 10 to 15 minutes is not normally enough time for law enforcement to respond. Think about how many times you've been at home and there was something going on and you turn around and call the police and the police didn't get there, within minutes. Well, if they do get there within minutes, it's only because that lead car, or the car that gets the call, might possibly already be in the neighborhood. Now, you have to understand that individuals are going to have to be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. What does that mean? That means you can't just wait for law enforcement. I mean, law enforcement may be on their way. There may be depending on the workplace, there could be security guards, if you will. But remember, security guards are there, security guards, and I don't think any of them are going to necessarily take one for the team. Law enforcement, that's their job, quite frankly. But what do you do when there's an active shooter? And I think that's the critical aspect that employers need to start thinking about. Now, look, in the work environment, you may have a small work environment, and you may say, well, this is never going to happen. I'm not worrying about a terrorist blowing up my business or walking in with a automatic rifle. But listen, domestic terrorism, in my opinion, is more of an issue on the workplace than necessarily the international terrorism, because those happen normally on a larger scale, such as an Orlando situation or a Paris situation. But if you look at a San Bernardino situation, in my opinion, that's on a much smaller scale. It's unfortunate that a number of people were killed at that time. But any business that's operating that has employees can also have a domestic terrorism situation. Let me be a little clearer about that. You could have a former disgruntled employee, which may have been what San Bernardino was all about. You hear in the news all the time. Walmart had a situation the other day with a disgruntled employee that came back and shot some individuals. You could have a family domestic situation that brings a person onto the premises looking for a spouse or a domestic partner, whatever the case may be. So your horizons have got to open up about who this active shooter may be. It's not just somebody who, let's just say, you will say or think that they are of Middle Eastern descent. It doesn't necessarily have to happen that way. Timothy McVeigh with the Oklahoma bombing was an example of homegrown terrorism. So this business about an active shooter in the workplace is something for you to need to consider, but it doesn't always just have to be a shooter. There's other issues of violence that you need to be aware of. So it's not just something with guns. Now, the Department of Homeland Security has actually put together a guide on how to respond to active shooters. Now, just some basics with this. The guide will instruct you how to respond if an active shooter is in your vicinity. They talk about what to do. Should you evacuate the building? Should you hide? And if it's a last resort, somehow or another take action. You know, one of the things that amazed me about the situation in Orlando was that you had all of those individuals. You had one guy with a gun. Now, look, people aren't necessarily always going to step up to the plate, but simply when a guy starts shooting a gun, if people collectively, try to rush an individual, yes, some people are going to get hit, but the amount of lives that could have been saved could have been more. But again, those are the situations where everybody is probably looking at self-preservation, and they're not always thinking about being a hero, and I get that. But and again, I wasn't on the inside, and we don't know exactly everything that happened other than some of the information is being presented by some of the victims that survived that situation. The guide from Homeland Security also tells you how to respond when law enforcement arrives. More importantly, in my opinion, it also tells you how to train your staff, including implementing an emergency action plan and running training exercises, which is one of the things that we're going to be doing to offer that to our clients. How HR and management should prepare for and respond during an active shooter event. Again, this all has to do with preparation. It's like any other catastrophe of some sort that may happen where an employer has instructions like fire drills, and you know about that, fire drills, earthquake drills, and things of that nature. Now we've got to add another area of training. Now, as far as an emergency action plan is concerned, the Department of Homeland Security suggests that an effective plan such as that contains a number of different areas. And again, I'm only going over this briefly for you. I can provide some more information for you if you contact me individually. But they expect an emergency action plan is going show the following: a preferred method for reporting fires and other emergencies, an evacuation plan and procedure. Now, Cal OSHA already requires evacuation plans on the back of the doors, of offices. The conference room door should have one as well. You can also contact, to get information for the responsibilities of individuals to be contacted under the emergency action plan as well. Excuse me. Information concerning local hospitals, name, telephone number, address, etc. Most importantly, how far away are they from your facility? All right. An emergency notification system to alert various parties of an emergency, including individuals at remote locations within the premises, local law enforcement, local area hospitals. Now look, excuse me. I'm giving you this as a flavor for what's going on. I think that this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of our preparation. We need to start considering these things moving forward. And I'm not trying to be a guy from a negative standpoint. I'm looking at this from a practical standpoint. The times are changing, and we have to start preparing for these. It's not going to get any better. And, you as an employer are not going to want to be sued at some point because of the fact that some anal retentive plaintiff attorney comes up with the idea that because of the fact that this is all well known now that these things can happen, what did you as an employer do in order to prepare for any of these kind of issues that may happen in your workplace? All right, with that last comment, it's time to close out this segment, but let me remind you, you can also hear us on Facebook at Listen Up and subscribe to us on iTunes. Just search for Listen Up with Jim Potts. And as a reminder, we take calls every third Friday. And we can be reached at 855-4J-POTS or 855-457-6887. Try to call us between 9:45 and about 10:45, and you might get through. Although we don't get a lot of calls. We get a lot of emails instead of calls. People, I guess, get embarrassed or whatever the case may be. I don't know what the big deal is, but that's okay. Or you can email us at listenup@JamesWilliamPottsLLC.com. Okay, I'm Jim Potts. I will continue to fight the fight. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.
Thank you for being a part of Listen Up with Jim Potts. We take your calls every third Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for your questions and concerns. Call us at 1-855-4J-POTS. That's 1-855-4J-POTS. Again, that's every third Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time at 1-855-4J-POTS. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on iTunes, and link up with us on LinkedIn. You can also email us at listenup@JamesWilliamPottsLLC.com. Until next time, make it a great week.